Ilan Papé's Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic tells the story of how Zionist lobbying has shaped Western policies and perceptions of the Middle East over the past century. Rather than presenting a dry chronicle of events, the book reveals the human side of political maneuvering, how passionate beliefs, personal ambitions, and shifting alliances have all contributed to the modern geopolitical landscape. A humble beginning. Back in the late 1800s, the idea of a Jewish state was nothing more than a hopeful dream. Zionist leaders knew that to make their vision real, they had to win over powerful nations. They reached out to Christian evangelical groups who, driven by their own biblical beliefs, saw the return of Jews to the Holy Land as a divine promise fulfilled. These early alliances opened doors into elite political circles and set the stage for what was to come. One of the key figures during this time was Theodor Herzl, often called the father of modern Zionism. Herzl's tireless diplomatic efforts across Europe showed just how important it was to connect with influential leaders if the Zionist dream was to take shape. Building a lobby in Britain. As the 20th century began, these efforts became more organized in Britain. A major breakthrough came with the 1917 Balfour Declaration, where Britain publicly supported the idea of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Leaders like Chaim Weizmann used their talents, ranging from scientific accomplishments to skilled diplomacy, to forge influential relationships. Organizations such as the British Zionist Federation sprang up, using newspapers, lectures, and publications to align their goals with British ideals and imperial interests. Crossing the Atlantic to the United States. Recognizing the growing power of the United States, Zionist advocates expanded their efforts across the Atlantic. The American landscape, with its mix of diverse opinions and democratic values, required a different, more flexible approach. The creation of the American Zionist Emergency Council, AZEC, marked the start of a vigorous campaign to sway U.S. foreign policy. Through media campaigns, educational initiatives, and strategic political donations, they aimed to build a broad base of support. Influential voices like Rabbi Stephen S. Wise helped galvanize American Jews and build bridges with non-Jewish leaders, efforts that even influenced President Woodrow Wilson's endorsement of earlier Zionist aims. Post-war momentum and the rise of IPAC. After World War II and the Holocaust, global empathy for Jewish suffering created an environment ripe for change. In the United States, this led to the formation of IPAC in 1951, a lobby that would become synonymous with unwavering support for Israel. AIPAC worked through thorough research, targeted political contributions, and grassroots organizing to secure a lasting place for Israel in US policy. Meanwhile, in Britain, Zionist groups had to adapt to a new era as the British Empire declined, focusing on countering negative media portrayals and addressing emerging pro-Palestinian voices. The media as a battleground. From early newspapers to today's digital platforms, controlling the narrative has always been central to Zionist lobbying. In the US, groups like the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, closely monitored how Israel was portrayed in the media and pushed back against what they saw as biased coverage. During the 1967 Six-Day War, for example, they worked hard to frame the conflict in terms that highlighted Israel's need for self-defense, thereby cementing public and political support. Facing challenges and new voices. Despite decades of influence, Zionist lobbying has never been without its challenges. As Palestinian rights movements and international solidarity campaigns gained momentum, counter-narratives began to emerge. Movements like boycott, divestment, sanctions, BDS, started in 2005, sought to pressure Israel economically and politically. In response, pro-Israel groups intensified their efforts to discredit these movements and even pushed for laws that penalized boycott activities, broadening the reach in Europe. The influence of Zionist lobbying is not limited to Britain and America. In France, historical events such as the Dreyfus Affair set the stage for a complex engagement with Zionism, while in Germany, the painful legacy of the Holocaust has fostered a sense of moral responsibility towards supporting Israel. Adapting in the digital age. As our world has shifted online, so have lobbying tactics. Modern Zionist organizations now harness the power of social media, digital campaigns, and online petitions. They've learned that building alliances, sometimes with unexpected partners like evangelical groups or military interests, can strengthen the message that support for Israel is as much about national security as it is about cultural or religious identity. The vigorous lobbying against the Iran nuclear deal in 2015 is a prime example of how these modern tactics continue to shape political debates. Law, academia, and the battle for the narrative. In recent years, the focus has also shifted to the legislative arena. In the US, several states have passed laws aimed at curbing support for the BDS movement, framing any criticism of Israel as not just political dissent, but even as a form of anti-Semitism. Similar legislative efforts have taken root in parts of Europe, stirring heated debates about free speech and the boundaries of political criticism. Academia, too, has become a key battleground. Pro-Israel think tanks work tirelessly to influence policy through research and conferences, while on college campuses, clashes over how and even whether to discuss Palestinian rights have become increasingly common. Looking ahead, a changing landscape. As we move forward, the future of Zionist lobbying is at a crossroads. On one hand, long-established networks and deep institutional support in the West suggest that these efforts will continue to wield significant power. On the other, shifting demographics, especially among younger generations in the US, and new global power dynamics could challenge the old ways. Recent political changes, including the Abraham Accords and the rising influence of nations like China and Russia, signal that the geopolitical landscape is evolving, and so must the strategies of any lobbying effort. Final reflections. Pappé's analysis reveals a striking truth. When power has to constantly reinvent itself to stay in control, it shows signs of fragility. The history of Zionist lobbying is not just a tale of political maneuvering. It's a story of how controlling the narrative can reshape laws, influence media, and ultimately direct the course of history. Yet, history also reminds us that no system is unchangeable. Empires fall, and suppressed truths have a way of emerging. In the end, a power that must endlessly defend itself by changing the rules may not be as enduring as it seems.